For my Asian and white brothers that are being oppressed by the affirmative action standards, yes.
So what's your take?
Some of the numbers that I've seen for like the differences in standardized test scores between like black students and Asian students, it looked like it was like insane.
Yeah, I think that they said like a black student who's like fourth from the bottom decile is equal to an Asian student like the top decile.
So the strongest arguments that I heard for affirmative action, and it's been a long time since I read any of these briefs, was I thought the idea was, what I'm saying is if you're drafting black people into schools and you know they've got a much higher fail rate because you're affirmative action drafting them, but you're doing it to enrich the educational outcomes of everybody there, how is that not just like drafting black people into environments, setting them up to fail so that you enrich the educational outcomes of like white people and Asian people?
The worst thing about affirmative action is that it created a Clarence Thomas who benefited from the program and now is in a position where he's going to deny.
Ooh, does he know that? Does he know that for a fact? What is Clarence Thomas's background? He attended the College of the Holy Cross and later Yale Law School, where he was influenced by a number of conservative authors, notably Thomas Sowell. Based. Upon graduating, he was appointed as assistant attorney. Is there any way to find out? I wonder if he, from 1971 to 1974, Thomas attended Yale Law School as one of 12 black students. He graduated with a JD degree somewhere in the middle of his class. He has said that the law firms he applied to after graduating from Yale did not take his JD seriously, assuming he attained it because of affirmative action. According to Thomas, the law firms also asked pointed questions, unsubtly suggesting that they doubted I was as smart as my grades indicated. In a 2007 memoir, he wrote, I peeled a 15-cent sticker off a pack of cigars and stuck it on the frame of my law degree to remind myself of the mistake I'd made by going to Yale. I never did change my mind about its value. Huh. So we don't really know, huh?
Many young African-American talented individuals an opportunity. Historically, the problem has been that institutions of higher learning, corporations, companies, and other entities have denied well-qualified African-Americans and other individuals access in terms of admissions, employment, because of their race.
I'd be really curious to see Clarence Thomas talking about how affirmative action helped him get in. I'd be interested in seeing that. My ultimate position for affirmative action for colleges, I'm not really a big fan of it. I don't think it worked very well, but that was based on the little bit that I read about it. When I tried to do research on affirmative action, it felt like, it feels like basically what happens is it just gets more people into school to fail. That was what I kind of stumbled upon. I don't know if there's like other data out there that shows something different, but. Oh, the mismatch idea. That's essentially what I came up with. Yeah. Most troubling was the fact that many well-prepared students undermatch by going to a school that is not demanding enough and are less likely to graduate as a result. Intuitively, I would feel that is absolutely not true. I'd be curious what the research says on that. Comes to the opposite conclusion and finding that California's Prop 209, a voter initiative ban on affirmative action, led to an improved fit between... Oh, this NBER working paper is probably the one that I read.
So should we talk about affirmative action?
Yeah, what about it?
So you told me that you were like really happy about it, about the Supreme Court ruling yesterday for your Asian women.
For my Asian and white brothers that are being oppressed by the affirmative action standards, yes.
So what's your take? All you told me was that you
probably shouldn't use racial considerations when you're admitting people to college. Probably not a good idea. I don't even know if like empirically if it's worked out that well for oppressed minorities.
What do you mean? How has it not worked out?
More of them get into school, but I don't think more of them are actually graduating as a result. I don't think it's the best thing to do on the college level.
I've seen the opposite, that like in California, once they passed like Prop 209 and then they banned affirmative action, that like you could see like a decline in graduation rates for Black and Hispanic people.
Decline or an incline?
Decline after they eliminated affirmative action.
Oh, I'd have to go and check because all of the research that I did was in California, and it seemed like in California that's where they established the idea of the mismatch problem. And I think that's why affirmative action got abolished there, because what they found was they were dramatically increasing the rates at which oppressed minorities were getting into schools, but the graduation rates and absolute numbers were staying the exact same. So people would just get into schools that they couldn't compete in, and then they would just flunk out.
Yeah, I didn't see that. I literally saw the opposite, was that like...
Hold on. Are you talking about, this is really, really, really important. Are you talking about graduation rates, or are you talking about enrollment rates? Because I notice that when people try to sell affirmative action as being a positive program, oftentimes they'll talk about enrollment rates, but they won't actually talk about graduation rates. And the graduation rates is where you saw that it wasn't very effective in California, I believe.
graduation rates got worse because they weren't getting into the higher tier schools as much. So you saw a decline of like Black and Hispanic people in California in these higher, like the more selective schools, but you saw an increase in their enrollment at lower selective schools. But apparently that higher enrollment at lower selective schools also leads to like lower enrollment in STEM fields for some reason, lower graduation rate, lower job prospects.
Affirmative action eliminated California result. Let's see. Oh my God, we got our first article is just a banger. For decades, the question of affirmative action, whether colleges should consider race when deciding which students to admit, has been the subject of national debate. And as the nation's highest court has grown more conservative in recent years, court watchers wondered if it would reverse decades-old precedents allowing affirmative action. This week it happened. The Supreme Court struck down race-based admissions practices at public and private universities and colleges. Show the screen? I'm literally reading it. Why do you need to see the screen? Close your eyes, you retard. The Supreme Court justices ruled that the admissions policies at the University of North Carolina, one of the country's oldest public universities, and Harvard University, the country's oldest private university, violated the Equal Protections Clause of the 14th Amendment. As college admissions offices prepare to tailor their policies to the Supreme Court ruling, California offers lessons on what may be in store for the rest of the country. Here's the upshot. A quarter century after California banned race-based admissions at public universities, school officials say they haven't been able to meet their diversity and equity goals, despite more than $500 million spent on outreach and alternative admissions standards. Is upshot supposed to be good, or is upshot just like the thing that happens?
I don't know.
The final or eventual outcome or conclusion. Okay. In an amicus brief sent to the Supreme Court in support of Harvard and UNC's race-based admissions programs, the University of Carolina chancellors said that University of California chancellors said that years of crafting alternative race-neutral policies have fallen short. Those programs have enabled UC to make significant gains in its system-wide diversity, the brief said. Yet despite its extensive efforts, UC struggles to enroll a student body that is sufficiently racially diverse to attain the educational benefits of diversity. The shortfall is especially apparent at the system's most selective schools, the university leaders said. An affirmative action ban first caused a huge drop in diversity at top California universities. In 1996, California voters approved Prop 209, an affirmative action ban at public universities in the state. Before the ban, UC Berkeley and UCLA were roughly representative of the California high school graduate population who were eligible for enrollment at universities, according to Zachary Bleemer, an economist at Princeton University. The ban first took effect with the incoming class of '98. Subsequently, diversity plummeted at UC's most competitive campuses. That year, enrollment among Black and Latino students at UCLA and UC Berkeley fell by 40%, according to a 2020 study by Bleemer. As a result of the ban, Bleemer found that Black and Latino students who might have gotten into those top two schools enrolled at less competitive campuses. Black and Hispanic students saw substantially poor long-run labor market prospects as a result of losing access to these very selective schools.
I have my talking points in this.
Do you want to read this? Go. You're reading now. Go ahead.
Oh, I forgot they can't see it.
Nope, go.
Black and Hispanic students saw substantially poor long-run labor market prospects as a result of losing access to these very selective universities, but there was no commensurate gain in long-run outcomes for the white and Asian students who took their place. Black and Latino students were also less likely to earn graduate degrees or enter lucrative STEM fields. If you follow them into the labor market for the subsequent 15 or 20 years, they're earning about 5% lower wages than they would have earned if they'd had access to more selective universities under affirmative action. I feel like that's the gist.
Bleemer said, the ban has in fact acted as a deterrent to prospective Black and Latino students, Bleemer said. His study found that high-performing minority students were subsequently discouraged from applying to schools where minority students were underrepresented. Most do not want to attend a university where there's not a critical mass of same-race peers, said Mitchell Chang, the Associate Vice Chancellor of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at UCLA. That's because attending a school made less diverse by an affirmative action ban puts them at greater risk of being stereotyped and being isolated, he said. These findings provide the first causal evidence that banning affirmative action exacerbates socioeconomic inequities. Ugh, I hate that word now. Bleemer's study said. A learning curve. Faced with plummeting minority enrollment, admissions offices began a years-long effort to figure out ways to get their numbers back up. Admissions offices pivoted to a more holistic approach, looking beyond grades and test scores. Starting in the early 2000s, the UC system implemented a couple of initiatives to increase diversity. The top performing students Graduating most high schools in the state were guaranteed admission to most of the 8 UC undergraduate campuses. It also introduced a comprehensive review process to evaluate students' academic achievements in light of the opportunities available to them, using an array of criteria including a student's special skills and achievements, special circumstances, and location of high school. In 2020, the UC system eliminated standardized test scores as an admission requirement, nixing a factor that advocates say disadvantages underserved students. Oof. However, the effort to boost diversity has come with a heavy price tag. Since Prop 209 took effect, UC has spent more than $500 million on outreach programs and application reviews to draw in a more diverse student body. It's taken 25 years of experimentation through race-neutral policies for UC schools have begun to catch up to the racial diversity numbers lost in the wake of the affirmative action ban, says UCLA Vice Chancellor Chang. There was no magic bullet. Some things work better than others, and this is also work that doesn't happen overnight, Chang said. Still, California schools are unable to meet their diversity goals system-wide. Chang says his school is not where it wants to be. It still enrolls far fewer Black and Latino students than their share of California high school graduates, a problem it didn't have before the affirmative action ban. As with the UC system, experts think that across the country, similarly competitive university will be most affected by the Supreme Court's rulings. Gabrielle Starr, president of Pomona College, a small Southern California school that wasn't subject to the state ban, fears the selective private university will lose its racial diversity under the nationwide affirmative action ban. Starr says that being able to consider race has allowed her school to ensure its ability to put together a diverse class. Having a campus that looks like the world in which our students will go on to live is really important, just as a bedrock value, she said. Wow.
But you still hate affirmative action after this?
Yeah, I actually feel even stronger in my position. I think less minority students were graduating. I think that is the case.
But during affirmative action?
No, when affirmative action, I don't think affirmative action was helping graduation rate as much.
It said that in this?
It tried to say the opposite, but there's like a little trick I noticed. But I'll probably click through and check the study.
What's the trick? I want to see.
Okay, let's say that I do a study and I'm like, I want to see if Black people or white people are more likely to eat fried chicken, okay? Let's say that at the end of the study, I come out and I say, I think that actually Black people are, because what I found was, in my cohort of 35 to 44-year-old Black people that live in Tampa, they're actually way more likely to eat fried chicken than white people. Usually when I hear people make a claim and they qualify it in kind of a weird way, it makes me feel like the broad amount of data that they collected doesn't enforce what they were saying. So for instance, a really strong claim might be graduation rates decreased in the whole for like Black and Latino students. When I see something that says Black and Latino students were less likely to earn graduate degrees or enter lucrative STEM fields, that's a really big qualifier that's strange. It makes it sound like the broader trend of their like graduation thing wasn't affected that much. But we can actually just go read his study and find out what exactly they were researching. I could be wrong. That's just what my intuition points at.
Like you're saying, because they're saying they're less likely to go on to earn
I'm saying
masters.
That qualifying it by graduate degrees and like STEM field entrance is like a really weird thing. Like when we talk about whether affirmative action works or not, it's not like we need to get Black and Latino students to get graduate degrees or graduate STEM. Usually it's just like, are they graduating with like bachelor's degrees, like as a whole in general, right?
I guess. But the whole point of going to a higher selective school is that you're going to have better job prospects. And if like going into STEM increases your income opportunities, I guess that's why people focus on STEM more. Because it's not like when affirmative action is eliminated, people aren't going to college. Like I was saying, enrollment at like the less selective schools go up, but the people like wonder what the like try to assess what the value is of even going to those schools if it's leading to like
I don't
lower
buy
graduation, less STEM, worse
I don't
job
buy
prospects.
that. You don't have to get a STEM degree to get like better prospects when you graduate. And I don't think that like the only way you measure it is through STEM degrees.
You don't have to. That's why they gave like a plethora of other things. They said
A
graduation.
plethora?
They said
Graduate degree? You also don't need graduate
No, not
degrees.
here. I'm just saying in general.
Well, but in here, they just said graduate degrees or enter lucrative STEM
Yeah, this
fields.
isn't a study. This is
Well, but he's
an
quoting a
NPR
study.
article that came out like 20 minutes ago.
But they're quoting the study here by this guy. So I'm just curious what... But we can just read it. We don't have to read the whole thing. But yes, this is what it means to actually get informed on an issue, okay? It's not... Okay, stop.
I watched Hassan debrief it all.
Yeah, Hassan doesn't
I'm
read
just kidding.
fucking anything either,
I
okay?
actually haven't heard his take on this
Okay.
yet.
Talk to the chat and give me like 5 minutes to just like peruse this, and then I can check, okay?
So you're the literate one and I'm the
Yeah, if
white.
it's intimidating to actually look at research, yeah, I can just read this and then, yeah. Talk to chat. Look, they're right here.
No.
What is the formatting of this fucking paper?
But
Why
you
don't
were
do
saying
this?
you're against it because you don't think race should be a factor in admissions decisions.
From a constitutional point, it probably shouldn't be, regardless of outcomes. But then, like, if constitutionally, if it's questionable, and then if the outcome wasn't even that great, then I would say probably not a good idea.
But you're not against, like, probably some schools being, like, single sex and just wanting women at their school, right? Even though it's technically discrimination on the basis of gender.
I think you're allowed to discriminate on the basis of gender if you have, like, a necessary business reason for doing so.
So Harvard argues that, like, their mission statement is to promote diversity in the same way, like, they appealed this, like, years ago, I think. They brought it to the Supreme Court, and they're like, same way we want New Yorkers, we want people from California, we don't just want people from the Boston area. We want athletes who also have, like, a worse GPA than maybe someone who's not an athlete and has a higher GPA. Like, they just promote diversity, so they just see race as, like, one factor on just, like, a laundry list.
Yeah, but it's
diversity.
not just one factor. Race is unique in that in the United States, race is a protected class, right? Just like I might, like, want a wide variety of people to live at my apartment building, so I'm going to pick between veterans and non-veterans. I'm going to pick between black people and white people. I'm going to pick between women and men. You can't do that. You could say, like, I want people that live... I think, like, if you were to discriminate geographically, like, I don't want any renters that aren't from Boston, I think you can do that, because geography is not a protected class. But if you just say, I don't want any veterans living here, veteran status is
and
protected
the Supreme
class.
Court doesn't uphold using race as, like, the sole criterion. They says it has to be a holistic review. So race could be one thing you consider, same way.
But I don't think you can do that anywhere with a protected class. If I've got between two employees that I need to hire, and I'm like, I'm gonna pick this one because he's the white one. But I'm looking at the whole thing.
If you say it was just because he's white, you can't. But if they're equally qualified, and you say, okay, we want a black guy, you are allowed to do that.
I don't believe you are, unless it's like for entertainment and stuff. If you want, like, an actor who's black, there's carve-outs for that.
Every, like, business in America has, like, some level of, like, a race-conscious program like that. Like,
yeah, the DEI initiatives or whatever. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are usually the... But I don't believe you're allowed to hire somebody just based on race. I don't think you can ever... Like, even if that's... I don't think it's allowed to be a factor. I don't think you're allowed to do that.
It is allowed to be a factor, and it is allowed to be a factor generally at schools. They even said it could be a factor, like, if you put it in, the Supreme Court even said yesterday, like, they could put it in their essay and be like, this is how being black has affected me, and then that's allowed.
Yeah, but that's different than choosing somebody because they're black.
Yeah, like I said, it can't be the sole criterion.
No, that's not a criteria. That's just talking about a particular experience, right? Like, you could say, this is how being a veteran affected me, this is how my family status affected me,
Yeah.
But you're not picking them because they're a veteran or because of their family status, right?
But I'm saying Harvard was never, like, plucking people simply because of their race. It was, like, another factor they considered, just like their socioeconomic
We're looping, but I'm saying it's not
background,
allowed to
their
be a
state.
factor. Socioeconomic factor.
It was allowed to be a factor until yesterday.
Well, no, it was. Yeah, I'm saying. But I'm saying that, like, socioeconomic background, that's not a protected class in the United States. Protected classes are, there's, like, some, I think it's, like, 5 or 6 things. It's, like, sexual orientation, I think sexuality, race, ethnicity, I think national origin, I think, is one, veteran status, family status, so, like, whether you have kids or whatnot. There might be, like, 1 or 2 more, but there are protected classes. Age, I think, might be one. There are protected classes where you have to have a compelling reason to discriminate on the basis of any of these things. Religion might be one too. Yeah.
Discriminate against. I don't think discriminate towards. You have to have a reason.
It's the same thing. It means the same thing.
No, because when the Supreme Court allowed, like, affirmative action, they said as long as it's not, like, a negative discrimination. So they said you are allowed to, like, discriminate towards.
Oh.
As in, like, in an inclusive way, not an exclusive way. So you can't, like, not include a black student because you're like, well, I think...
Sure, I'm sorry. I'm saying in general how it works. For schools, they carved out this particular thing for affirmative action, but, like, in any other place where protected classes exist, you're not allowed to do it.
Well, we're talking about affirmative action.
Sure. But I'm saying that when you're saying, well, affirmative action was okay because it's part of it, like socioeconomic background, that's not a protected class, so it's fundamentally, like, a different thing.
So you think affirmative action's wrong because it, like, factors in race, which is a protected class?
Yeah, that's the argument against it.
See, that's just not true. Like, a school will accept women because they want more women at their school, even if, let's say, there were more qualified men. So you're not going to argue, well, they need to just judge solely on, like, merit. You would want schools to also factor in these other protected classes.
I'm not actually 100% sure if that's true.
Like gender, religion.
I'm trying to think, because, like, I think even for, like, HBCUs,
National origin,
can't you apply to an HBCU as a white person? I think you can.
You can, yeah, there are some.
For women's schools, can't men still apply to those schools?
No, I don't think so. Like, I don't think there's white kids at HBUs. I don't think there's any, like, black kids at Barnard or anything.
Can men go to all women's colleges?
Or guys at Barnard, I mean.
Can men attend women's college? Depends on the college. There are some colleges only accept women. Some also admit transgender students who identify as female. I'd have to go and read the. You can for HBCUs. It's uncommon if they do it. I'd have to go and read the arguments for.
I guess I'm just saying, like, I don't understand why race has to be off the list of.
Because it's a protected class.
But we just proved that, like, they factor in other protected classes. They factor in national origin. At my boarding school, they sought out kids from Somalia, and like that's not a thing.
Sure, I'm just saying that for all of these protected classes, you have to make you got to make an argument for why you ought to be able to do that. If I wanted to let's say that I wanted to have a job and I only want to hire middle class people, I don't have to argue with anybody about it. I can just do that. Because income is not a protected class.
Yeah, Harvard argued years ago that it's to promote educational diversity.
Sure.
They think it helps the white majority to experience minority races and vice versa.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that, yes, the protected classes are unique. You can't say, well, we also discriminate on like socioeconomic backgrounds and race. The race thing is because it's like federally, these are protected classes. You can't discriminate against when it comes to like employment or housing. For other things, you have to make a positive argument for this is why we ought to be able to engage in this level of discrimination. For
and
affirmative
they did.
action.
What's your point?
Yeah, they did. Well, now they haven't. Now it's gone, right?
But what's your argument?
My argument is I don't think you should be able to discriminate for
Yeah, and I was asking
classes.
you why, and you said because it's a protected class, and I'm saying they already factor in the protected classes when they seek out people with different national origins and ethnicities and genders. So then I'm asking...
Well, if you ask me the reason why, like protected classes exist, I guess is because I don't think that you should...
No, that's not why I'm asking that.
Fundamentally, I don't think you should be discriminating against potential applicants based on their race. I don't think that's very fair.
But they already do that with socioeconomics. Like if they have two...
No.
Yes, they do. That's what Harvard was saying. Is like if we have two students, identical merit, but one's maybe poorer, like first gen, if we like feel like we're lacking that in our student body, we might pick that. Or if they're a pianist or a violinist or an athlete, we're going to pick someone, even if they maybe have a little bit less merit in terms of SAT scores or GPA. Like they've already said before, we don't only prioritize academic excellence. They've said that so many times. They created like the gold standard for affirmative action because they said we've always valued diversity, not just in terms of race, but in terms of like ethnic background, in terms of religion,
I just don't like
states.
that. Like if they want to create a more diverse background in some ways, like having people from different like areas of the state they live in or whatever, that's fine. I just don't like the idea of like an Asian or a white kid that outperforms somebody else not getting into the school solely on racial background, on ethnic background. I don't know if that should be like a consideration.
Okay, then why not? Do you oppose when it's for socioeconomic reasons? Like I didn't get in because I'm rich and there's a poor kid applying and they want that socioeconomic diversity?
I think you can make a stronger argument for socioeconomic than you can for ethnic background. Because a kid coming from, if there's a kid that went to like my high school and he graduates with like a 4.0 and he gets like I don't even know what the high school on the SAT is now, versus a kid that like grew up in like a literal ghetto, like the worst parts of DC, and he came out of school with like a 3.8 GPA and he did really well in his SATs, not as well as me. I think you can make a really strong argument for why this guy probably should be at this school. But because they're black, no.
Why not just uphold the same standard that the Supreme Court said yesterday about race? Like that person who grew up in the ghetto, they could put it in an essay and say, I overcame the struggles of growing up in the ghetto. But
that's fine. There's nothing
wrong with... But that's not where you're arguing.
But saying that like, well, we want him because we want more black people, I don't think that's okay.
But they want so many things from other backgrounds, like I just said, location. So I'm asking you, why is race the different thing to you? Like why is that the outlier factor between like I'm from New York or I'm poor or I'm first generation or I play piano or I'm going to offer something different to this school just because I'm poor or just because I'm from New York?
You could, yeah. I don't know if you could just because of your race though.
Okay, what about like national background?
Because the argument for national background, I think that you can probably show that in other ways. So when you go to write like an entrance essay or whatever, or when you see like the things you've been involved in, depending on the background nationally, there's going to be ways that might come out in your application process. That's not just, oh, I'm from Kenya, right? It's probably going to be a participation in certain community events, certain types of like social work or whatever, where it's like, oh, obviously I have this background and you can see how it shows my life, and it would show through there, not just because of your national background, I think.
My point is, even eliminating affirmative action yesterday, Harvard is still allowed to discriminate on the basis of socioeconomics or national origin. So if they want a kid who's from Kenya, they can do that. They don't have to make them put it in an essay. That's my point. But with race now, you do have to put it in an essay if you want that to be something factored in. And that doesn't make sense, because if you're saying there's no difference between a black kid and a white kid in terms of what they can contribute to educational diversity, because you're pretty much saying like black people aren't monoliths, white people aren't monoliths. That's fine. You could say like the kids from Kenya aren't a monolith either, right? So why see them as interchangeable with another Kenyan kid?
Wait, I don't know what you're asking here right now. Can you restate that?
My point was, you were saying that it's okay to factor in national origin so long as it's more than just...
No, I said the exact opposite of that. What I'm saying is you wouldn't have to factor in national origin, because the diversity of national... If you're going for a diversity of like activities and stuff in a student body, diversity of national origin will probably show, because people from different nations that immigrate here probably tend to act in different ways, and that'll come out in the application process. But you wouldn't explicitly have to check for national background. It would just come out in like the differences in behaviors of the student body.
My point is, they're allowed to discriminate on that basis. Do you have a problem with that?
They're allowed to discriminate on national origin?
Like, they're allowed to look at the country you're from, or like your income, or whether you came from a...
Well, hold on, wait, you're naming different things. Like national origin is different from income.
Yeah.
I think national origin is another one of those protected classes.
So you are against it then, because you were saying we shouldn't factor in protected classes, like we shouldn't discriminate.
Correct. Probably not against protected classes, yeah.
So you think that should also be eliminated, being able to get accepted into a school or having an edge on another student because you're applying from a different country?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And then also on the basis of gender, because that's a protected class, like if a school doesn't want to just be 90% men, but let's say, I don't know, it's like a STEM field where maybe men are outperforming the women, you don't think they should be allowed to accept women with maybe like a lower score because they want to value gender
I think you can
diversity?
probably make an argument for, and I think they did this similarly with affirmative action, I think you could probably make an argument for some diversity of gender, because having schools that are like 95% men, or some programs that are 95% men, are probably not like the best thing in the world, but...
Why? It's a protected class.
Because I think that having like a large group of like men and women is probably like an important thing. I don't know if having like 20% black people is an important thing. I don't know if that's worth the trade-off of like a whole bunch of kids that now don't get to go to a certain school because they don't have the right ethnicity. It's probably a lot different than having like not having a school that's like 99% men. I think you can make a stronger case there.
But it's holistic. Like that Asian student might be rejected for one reason, but they might be accepted because maybe they're from a specific Asian country that school wants to represent a little bit more. So it's like, it's not like people act like you're just getting rejected on the basis of your race, and you're not. They're not allowed to do that. Even pre the ruling yesterday, you still had to prove that it was holistic. And like I said, that it wasn't just the way you're describing it.
Sure, we're looping on this. I understand what you're saying.
You don't, because you keep saying like
well, no, you keep saying the same thing. You keep saying that it's holistic, and I'm saying if it's holistic, that's fine. I just don't know if like race should directly be like a thing that you factor in. And you're saying, well, they're not just factoring it in, they're doing it holistically. I'm saying I understand they're doing it holistically, but I don't know if like race should be a factor. And you're saying, yeah, but it's holistic. It's a
protected class, but you said it's different for these other protected classes like national origin. So that's why I was trying to figure out like
no, the standard that I'm using for race and national origin are the exact same. I've never said that like you should choose somebody just because they're from a certain country.
No one's saying just. We already established none of this.
Hold on, I'm sorry. I'm saying it shouldn't be a factor that you just because you're from a certain country.
Oh, but okay, sorry, gender.
Gender is one that I could see an exception for, but that's been argued against the courts for like all women's gyms or whatever. There's like a lot of exceptions that people will make there. But even at that, I would say that that's probably only to a limit as well, right? Like going for a 50-50 comp sci program is probably not a good idea.
Yeah, I don't think it's about going for 50-50. I don't think they're trying to necessarily represent like the percents to an exact number.
But I think that like some of the numbers that I've seen for like the differences in standardized test scores between like black students and Asian students, it looked like it was like insane.
Yeah, I think that they said like a black student who's like fourth from the bottom decile is equal to an Asian student like the top decile.
So the strongest arguments that I heard for affirmative action, and it's been a long time since I've read any of these briefs, was I thought the idea was that you have your general enrollment, which might be like 90 to 95% of students is like your general enrollment. And then on like this 5 to 10% side, you've got like your special enrollments. You've got things for like alumni, like children of them. You've got things for like sports scholarships and shit. And then you got things like affirmative action. If you've got like some percentage set aside where you're like doing an affirmative action program or whatever, I think that that's probably okay. I thought that was the argument that Harvard had made before, that like all of their admissions don't do this process. It was just for like special admissions or separate admissions. I thought that was what they had said in particular. But doing this on the whole student body, when like some of the outcomes for some of these students are so disparate, it's just like insane. like how much higher you had to score as like an Asian American or a white American in order to be accepted to a school. And then you're essentially like depriving, white or Asian Americans of certain, so then the effect is that you're depriving white and Asian Americans of certain educational opportunities, and then you're giving it to other students that my understanding is most of them just flunk out anyway. It's like you're getting, and then have all the student loans and everything else.
But they don't. We just read that they receive a greater value, these kids who are accepted versus via
We
affirmative
read
action.
that they were less likely to earn graduate degrees or enter STEM fields.
If you go to another study, I read that they literally earn a greater value than, at least in California after Prop 209, than like the white
Yeah,
and
but I
Asian
wanted to
students who
research,
took
but you
their
were too
place.
lazy to actually like let me go through an entire study and check.
Lazy?
Yes.
I don't think I interrupted you.
You did. You threw a fit, and you were like, "Oh my god, we gotta look at this thing."
Okay. But
Because that's an important qualifying too. Because if the educational outcomes were dramatically different, then I probably might feel a different way about it. But my understanding was in California, especially, that boosting all of these students into these schools wasn't. Well, it's you finding it isn't going to do anything for me. I'm going to read a study and actually.
Well, I'll email it to you.
Okay, sure, but I'm just saying like a Twitter headline or like a excerpt from an article. Like I want to see like the study, and I want to see like what is the actual
article link, not a Twitter headline. Shut the fuck up. But anyway.
Because not getting a graduate degree and like flunking out of school are two totally different things,
Okay, so you were pulling up these percents to show this is unfair because an Asian student has to be way more top tier to compete with like a more mid tier.
Why was it somebody just linked it? So I was looking at to see if my memory of the numbers.
Yeah,
right. But go ahead.
But I don't understand why you even bring this up because, again, you're fine with these disparities if it's in the case of gender because you're saying promoting gender diversity is okay. So would you...
Yeah, but I said like only to a certain extent. But I would feel the same way for for affirmative action for races to a certain extent too. Like I said, the argument that I thought was made before was that there's only like a certain percentage of admissions that are special admissions that would factor in things like race. And so far as that goes, I think that's probably fine. But if you're factoring it for the entire student body, I think you have to make a different type of argument.
Can you rephrase that?
If you have 95% of your student body is merit-based and you've got 5% set aside for other things, and part of those other things you might consider are like affirmative action or diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives, I think that that's probably fine.
Right.
But if you're factoring in race for 100% of your student body, I think that's probably not okay.
Okay, but like I was saying, Harvard never said that they just used academic merit for any of those percents. Like I said, like an athlete doesn't have to have the same GPA as a non-athlete necessarily.
Sure, but athletes
a
are
musician or an actor.
part of the special admissions, right? Because a lot of athletes go to school and they barely even participate academically. They're just
They
there for,
wanted
like, the
us to
football
see it as
program.
the same as like the athlete to the pianist to the guy who's studying history to the biologist. Like they try to value diversity in all these areas. And they're saying race is just another one, I guess is my point. So my point is like you're seeing it as like they judge in merit except for race, and my point is like Harvard was saying that they never looked at merit in like the way you're describing in this very like purely SAT/GPA way.
I don't think anything is purely SAT/ like standardized scores, right? There's a whole application process to go to college that's not just here are my scores, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm saying in that whole process, let's say, okay, I guess just let me put it this way. Like, let's say that are you okay with the disparity in scores needed to enter universities as Asians or white people compared to other students there? Do you think it's worth having a campus that has 15% of an oppressed minority or whatever, if it means that 10% of those could be people that go to better schools, people that have better jobs, people that pay more taxes, people that have better educational outcomes? Do you think it's okay to deprive them of the education for the...
Here's my thing. I think even post-affirmative action, it's not necessarily going to help Asians the way they think because even in a race-neutral admissions process, they're going to still factor in, like we were saying, socioeconomics. And like I think Asians come from the best performing families in terms of income. So let's say they're still trying to factor, they might more so now try to heavily factor in socioeconomic background. So it might still produce the same results for Asians in terms of lack of admission while also now producing worse results for Black and Hispanic students. Because now you might also just see an uptick in like poor white students getting in, which is fine, but
hold on, that's not what I asked. What I'm asking is that like, if it was the case that you're getting these massive disparate outcomes where to be white or Asian and getting these schools is so much more difficult, and then you've got other people getting to school and they're like dropping out because they can't, do you think that's like an okay outcome?
I guess I haven't seen that premise proven. Like I was saying, everything I've read has shown that like the students approved via affirmative action are getting greater value. Like I haven't seen this like higher dropout rate out of affirmative action.
Okay,
students.
if it was the case that they weren't getting greater value, would that change your mind on this? Is it just a disagreement on the fact of the matter, or?
Not necessarily, because like I said, if the school's mission statement is to promote educational diversity, they're allowed to define that within whatever parameters they want. And if they're saying we think it's a good educational experience, like this is the last bastion where students can learn under our thumb, like you were arguing last time during our college debate,
So
I
you
think
think
they
that,
have
like-
the right to say we want people from these racial backgrounds, national backgrounds to comprise our student body.
So keeping around like black people to enrich the educational outcomes of white people and Asian people is worthwhile to not having more white or Asian people that would have qualified in
Not
otherwise.
just like just for them. You're making it seem like they're
Well,
just
if they were dropping out, it would be
tool.
just for them. There are two other pets for like the Asian and white people, basically, to like have a more holistic college experience, and then they flunk out, and then the white and Asian people go into work. If it was the case that they're flunking out,
Well, now you're discriminating because it's like that's like the idea of asking black people to prepay at a restaurant because you're like, oh well, black people are more likely to dine and like.
Wait,
you know what I mean?
No, you're saying that
Like you're
because
saying,
I asked you,
should we
let's
not
say,
admit them because
well,
they have if they were to have a higher dropout rate? I'm saying even if that were the case, I don't think you shouldn't accept a student just because you're saying, oh, from their race we could predict that they're more likely to drop out.
No, it wouldn't be from their race. It would be like from their test scores and their educational attainment. You're the one that's saying that you want to put that aside and say maybe just on the factor of race, we're going to bump their application a bit and we're going to kind of not look as harshly on their test scores. But what I'm saying is that like if it was the fact of the matter that those people were graduating at far lesser rates, aren't you essentially just drafting black people into school so that they can fail out so
Okay,
that they can
so
enrich
based off their GPA and SAT scores, that'd be how you determine whether
That was the
they're gonna...
least important part of everything I
No,
just
I'm
said.
just asking.
I'm not going to tell you. Figure it out.
Because you were saying it's not based off their
stop.
race.
Just
What?
think about what I'm saying in terms of ideas. It's not that was the least important part of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're drafting black people into schools and you know they've got a much higher fail rate because you're affirmative action drafting them, but you're doing it to enrich the educational outcomes of everybody there, how is that not just like drafting black people into environments, setting them up to fail so that you enrich the educational outcomes of like white people and Asian people?
Because first of all, the objective wasn't to enrich the educational experience of just two groups. It also enriches their...
No, I'm saying that's the whole point I'm saying is if they don't graduate. That's why I'm trying to figure out if we disagree philosophically, if we just disagree on the fact of the matter.
I guess we disagree on the fact because I was saying,
Okay.
what makes you think they're going to drop out? And you said it's a hypothetical, but then you said it's not a hypothetical.
No. I'm
It'd
saying
be
it is
based-
hypothetical right now. Hypothetically. I'm saying hypothetically, if their graduation rates were abysmal because of affirmative action, would you still say that that initiative is good? I'm trying to figure out if we disagree on the fact of the matter or the philosophy.
I guess it's hard to predict. Like, how could you say... Like,
I
I'm
know
saying,
it's hard to predict. That's why it's hypothetical. We don't have to
No,
predict.
that's not my point. My point is, like, are you trying to say that then you would say, okay, we shouldn't admit them as much because there's a higher correlation of them dropping out? But that's why I brought up the diner example. I'm like, you can't predict if someone's going to drop out.
It's a hypothetical. We can't predict
No, but
it.
then you said you could predict it based off the GPA and SAT scores. That's why I was asking.
No, it's not about the GPA. It's about looking at prior. Let's say we live in a hypothetical world where 100 years of affirmative action has been practiced. Black graduation rates at affirmative action schools are 50% what they are at other schools. So we know that black people that are affirmative action drafted in are dropping out so much more than they are in other schools. Would you still continue affirmative action because it's enriching the educational experience of at least everybody else in that college because of the diversity?
I don't know. I guess it could go either way. You could say...
Well, of course it could go either way.
No, I
Find
know.
which way you go.
I was explaining. I was saying it could go
Okay.
either way because you could say, okay, even if they were dropping out, like, if the retention rate is low, then that gives transfer opportunities for other students, right? Like, you could still accept students afterwards. So my point is...
Well,
like,
but they're not going to be there while the affirmative action students are there, right?
My point is, if their goal is to, like you were saying, oh, well, they're not enriching the student life anymore if they're dropping out, you could argue, like, they are enriching the student life for the time they're there in this
I agree.
hypothetical.
Yeah,
And
but that's why
then
I'm
you
asking,
could
is it
still
okay to
in
bring them
new
there,
students.
flunk them out, but at least you're enriching the white and Asian students while they're there, and then they go on to graduate and reap the rewards for that?
That's, in this hypothetical, I would say that seems unfair to those students. Yeah, I just don't think that maps onto, like,
Okay.
the real world.
To think
real-
U.S. universities
fine.
pass
So-
off geniuses
Capital.
because they optimize for football.
The issue then is that we have just a disagreement on the fact of the matter of
Yeah.
whether or not they're flunking out at higher rates.
Yeah, I don't think they are. Like I said, everything I've read has said that they're getting a greater value. And the reason I brought up, I don't
know what greater value is. That's a weird way to phrase that, but like a black kid that goes to a $50,000 a year university is getting a greater value even if he flunks out at year 2 than a kid that would go to like a $5,000 a year university and graduate, because they're getting technically more value for their money, but like their lifetime earnings and the lack of degree is obviously
value
gonna be
in
way different.
terms of the fact that they're actually less likely to drop out when they're going to a higher tier school. Like, lower tier schools are less likely to motivate people. Like I said, you're less likely to enter STEM at lower tier schools for some reason, and you're less likely to pursue masters. You're less likely to get a higher paying job. So that's why I was saying everything I've read, like, just does not is not compatible with your hypothetical.
Okay, sure. So then our disagreement right now is just on fact of the matter then, right?
Is whether the hypothetical maps onto anything, yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, I brought up GPA and SAT score because you were saying those are predictors for maybe whether they're going to be flunking out.
Well, those are just the two things. There's like a ton of things they probably are decent predictors, actually, I would say, but sure.
Okay, that's why I was asking, because my point was you're okay with athletes getting in, even if they have like a lower GPA and SAT score, but would you say that also translates into a higher dropout rate because of those two factors? Or would you say no, because now there's this confounding variable of them being athletes?
I don't know. I'm not sure for athletes. I don't know how it works.
I guess my point was you keep like tying lower GPA and SAT scores just to affirmative action admission students, but my point is like that could be tied to students who get in, like I said, even from who have a different diversity factor other than race. Like I said, it could be gender, national origin, like an instrument they play, a certain field they want to study, like a niche subject.
Some of the things you're bringing up are like merit based, and some of them aren't. Like instrument you play, an athlete.
I'm just saying they don't necessarily correlate to SAT or GPA.
Sure, not necessarily, but that's why I'm saying it wouldn't only be SAT or GPA. But GPA and SAT, even you would agree.
I guess I was asking.
SAT and GPA, you would agree that they largely correlate to chances to pass or fail, right? Then if I were to draw a map of like 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 GPA people probably graduate way more than 3.0, probably graduate more than 2.0, probably graduate more than 1.0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do correlate. But I'm sure we can find exceptions as well, right? Sometimes there are extremely brilliant individuals like myself who didn't have the best GPAs. Sometimes there might be student athletes that are merit-based because they play sports really well, and they might have really, really good value to the school, and they stay there playing sports, but their GPA isn't as good. I'm sure we can find exceptions, but like largely that's going to map on probably, right?
Right, and I guess the reason people say that, like, you're saying that, like, playing an instrument is an exception, or, like, offering some other type of value could be an exception for why your GPA or, like, your SAT score is lower. I guess a lot of proponents for affirmative action will argue that, like, Black and Hispanic students have maybe had lower GPA or SAT scores because they didn't have the resources to like invest the time and prep into SAT. Because SAT, I don't think really just measures sheer merit. I think it's totally like an investment in preparation.
I totally disagree.
You don't really. I don't think in schools, at least when I went to school, you don't. I mean, I went to private school, so it's different. But like, I don't think most schools offer you like an SAT preparation course.
This might be. I feel like this is always a huge cope. But I would have to, I guess, dig into the research. The idea that like there are all of these incredibly smart people that just can't do tests well. I'd never believe that. I'm sure that there might be some, but I feel like for the most part, if you're a relatively smart individual, you're probably going to be pretty smart when it comes to figuring out tests. I don't agree that there are all these people that are so smart, but they just didn't do test prep. I don't agree with that.
Wait, what are you talking about? The SAT is pretty much, like your score is pretty much determined by test prep. Most people aren't taking the SAT cold. It's like most students who are going to Ivies are doing test preps. They have a
Sure, you can do test prep. But
that's like the default for getting to Ivies. Nobody's getting into Ivies taking the SAT cold.
Sure, but like I think that even the test prep you do is going to be factored in heavily with like your educational background. Like I don't think the difference. I don't know what the scores are that they use for the SAT anymore. I don't think the difference.
1600.
Is it still 1600? I thought it was like 20 or 220. Didn't they up it, or was it from 12? In my school, in my days, it was different.
They changed it from 2400 to 1600.
Okay, like I only took the ACT. Like I feel like a kid that would get like a 20 on the ACT is not going to test prep his way to a 30. I feel like it would.
That's not true at all.
I don't know how to prove it, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like a kid that gets like a 20, I feel like he could test prep his way to like a 23 maybe, but.
No, that's not true at all. These tests are literally measuring for the most part like your test taking skills.
That's super not true. I don't agree. At least for the ACT, that's definitely not true. Maybe for the SAT, it does.
ACT for SAT, I would say 100%.
I don't believe.
That's why these courses are such a lucrative industry.
Yeah, I'd have to.
They're not a
we would
scam.
need research.
Like everyone vouches. Like every teacher will vouch for it. Like the College Board will vouch for test prep courses.
When I took the ACT, it was testing whether or not you knew how to read, whether or not you knew how to read graphs, and whether or not you'd taken like basic math. That was the ACT. I can't see that. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to. There's another fact of the matter I'd have to do research on, but maybe the SAT is like fundamentally a super different style of test.
I would say your SAT score is probably like over 90% determined by preparation.
I know you're wrong on that. 100%.
If you take a kid that is incredibly smart in high school, this kid is doing all IB or AP classes, dual enrollment shit, and then he goes to take the SAT.
Cold?
He's not getting an 800.
No,
I don't believe
you take
it.
two students, one who probably has a 4.0 GPA and one who probably has like a 3.0. You give one 0 SAT test prep, and I think you give the other one like months of prep. I think the latter is beating out the first one 100% of the time.
Versus what's the difference in GPA?
It's arbitrary. My point is preparation is the biggest factor, determinant for your performance on the SAT. Like, that's 100% true. Like, what you were describing is not true at all. The idea that, like, someone who gets a low score can't, like, change
Yeah,
their...
I might just be biased. I need to do research on this. I took the final ACT cold, and I never did test prep in my life, and I got a 35 on it. But I've always been, like, really good at reading and, like, doing everything. Like, obviously, the math I took in school was way over the ACT limit. And I've heard for other things, like, there are a lot of students that I knew that did a lot of ACT prep, and they took that test, like, 4 times, and like their first score was like a 22, and I think the highest one, I can't name, Alex, went from a 22 to a 28, but I've never heard of somebody taking like they went from like a 20 to they did a ton of test prep and now they got like a 33. Maybe it happens and I just don't know enough about these tests, but that's always felt. I've never met a smart person. This sounds so mean. I'm so sorry, guys, if I'm shitting on half of you. I've never met a really smart person in my life who sucks at taking tests. Everybody that I meet that says that tests are like hard, but like the material, they're usually the retards that forget everything as soon as they graduate the class. Oftentimes they're degree holders that know less about their field than I do after reading a Wikipedia article. Like, most of these people are just retarded. That sounds so mean to say, but like I don't buy the whole like I can't do tests, they're so hard, but I know so much. I think most of these people are just retarded. But that just might be my I'm totally uneducated opinion. Yeah,
part of being a good test taker is knowing how the test works.
I disagree. It's just knowing how to read. Well, like here, let's actually dive into this. What does it mean to know how a test works? Here is how I knew how to.
You know how much time you have for each section, what the best way is to go about it. You know how many questions are on the test. Like,
hold on, you read it, you get a form that says 40. It's a on the ACT was it 25 or 40 questions? Like, what is the
difference in SAT prep results? Like, I'm telling you, it's drastic.
Okay.
If it wasn't, why would they even? Do you really think it's just a money grab that there's so many?
There's
courses?
so many money grab things around education.
Yeah, but do you think the teachers would vouch for those money grabs? Do you think like colleges would vouch for them?
I mean, if you really suck at taking tests, maybe they can help. I just don't. Yeah, I don't know.
A lot of it's vocabulary. Like, you can learn a lot of SAT vocabulary. Like, they have a very specific subsection of words that's like very specific.
Yeah,
to
but also
SAT.
if you just like read a lot and you already have the vocabulary, then you.
But it's like specific to the SAT, a lot of it.
Like, they have their own dictionary of like non-standard English words.
A lot of people will always say a lot of the words you'll see on the SAT you won't see again. Not even in like New York Times articles. Like, the language is so specific.
I can't speak to the SAT, so maybe that might be true on the SAT.
Jesus. I don't even understand this. Fuck, I have to spend time reading this.
Or
This says,
for
among
else,
students with verbal scores of 800, 86% score lower on a second testing. Wait, why would that even be the case? And 14% receive the same score? On average, a person with a verbal score of 800 loses 53 points on a second testing. Hold on, but this doesn't have to do with test prep. I'm just reading it. This is so weird. Oh, fuck. Wait, hold on. This is from jeffk.com. This says most test prep is nearly useless, but I don't know what this guy's even citing. Fuck. Hold on.
Sorry, I'm like coughing.
Good, that's good. Just like get me sick.
Or like the LSAT's a great example for that. Like, every law school will tell you that that's the most learnable test. And that's completely just based off preparation and like being a good test taker and like
I don't
really
even think
studying
that
test.
I think that preparation can help because the types of like logic questions that they ask you on that that's
they
like
want you to have a very specific thought pattern.
yeah, that's a specialty test though. So there's probably, is it the MCAT for med school? I bet studying for that is really important too. MCAT and LSAT, I would buy that 100%. But SAT and ACT are like, they're like general, very general in terms of what they're testing for, I think.
I don't know, the LSAT has a comprehension section, so does the SAT.
Yeah, but the comprehension is still, or at least from the little bit of the LSAT that we took on stream once and read, like a lot of it is like prop logic and hardcore testing for like logical consistency in statements and like read this passage and figure out if this or that. Like that the LSAT felt way more specified than the ACT and the SAT. For me, the ACT and SAT felt like if you're like a decently bright high school student who's got a good vocabulary, like to this you should do decently on the test. But this is just giving me one page of this. I don't know who linked me this. Okay, you know what? We should write down our fact of the matter disagreements. And then
I think it's like we should take the SAT.
No, because now I probably get like a 200 on it, okay?
What'd you say?
Now I probably do horrible on it.
You think you're dumber now?
I've forgotten like all the math I know. I don't even know how much fucking algebra I know. I got an argument with my chat about algebra that I'm wrong about now. So standardized scores, better or worse with test prep, and affirmative action is mismatch problem overrated. There you go. Investigating test prep impact on score gains using quasi-experimental propensity. Okay, so this is linked by ACT.com, but I mean, if they're citing research, it's good. But I mean, like, doesn't the ACT, don't they actually sell test prep courses? So this, I'm not saying that it necessarily makes their research wrong, but it's kind of like Coke publishing a study saying sugar is not bad for you, right? Is essentially.
But you could even say that they put out the test in a way where they want you to have to buy their book and study for it. Like, you could argue it in reverse, that like this proves that this is a test they want you to study for if they literally can profit off of you gaining more from preparing.
Okay, so this guy's saying something that I might believe. So he says, so DeCamel says, the SAT is better now, but the SAT that I studied for was not that general. The reading section has a lot of cringe grammar rules I would never know outside of prepping for it. That could be true. Like if there's like what's a participle phrase or like there's like random shit in grammar where it's like I would actually need to preparely study for this. Now when I took the ACT, that wasn't the case. I remember there were 4 sections. One was like, I don't think there was any calc. I think it was like trig was the highest part. The reading section was just, can you read? There might have been a vocab section, and then there was a science section, but the science section didn't require you to know any science. It just needed you to read like a
samples?
graph of what?
Like questions, like SAT questions. I feel like we could just debunk this right now.
Whoops. SAT questions.
Just go to College Board, yeah.
This?
Yeah. Show them. Okay, so yeah, this is probably more straightforward, but
Akira came directly, breaking.
See, you're supposed to read the questions first. That's what you learn from the prep. So you know what to be thinking of. They teach you how to like jot notes, like what's probably going to be a big.
Okay, but like you would probably learn that like taking tests in school. Like
I don't know.
Did you not take tests in high school?
Yeah, but those tests are more straightforward. SAT is testing your test-taking skills. Tests in school are testing your knowledge of like the content. So it's different. Like there are very like this is bringing back the memories. There's very specific tricks you're supposed to learn.
I think I'm starting to remember now that like I think the high school I went to was really good. Because what you're saying is like that's like shit I would learn my freshman year in high school. Like teachers would tell you like make sure that like I'm sorry.
I went to an elite
I remember
boarding
this
school.
in
Suck my
I remember
dick.
this in grade school. I remember one of the funniest. They gave us an assignment where all of us sat in class, and what they did was it was like step 1 was like take your shoe off. Step 2 was make a goofy noise. Step 3 was blah 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 blah. And then the final point was step 15 was don't do any of the things necessary.
Yeah.
So there would be like 3 kids sitting around while everyone was goofy.
This,
yeah, and the whole point that you were saying is like anytime you got a thing, always read the whole list before you begin the thing or whatever.
Yeah.
But so maybe in some high schools they wouldn't tell you this, but like sure.
I'm just saying nobody's getting into the Ivies not preparing for the SAT.
For Ivies, maybe. But Ivies is going to be the difference between like getting like top 5% and top like 1 or 2%.
Top tier school. No one's getting into a top tier school not preparing. Unless you're just naturally that good. But most people are putting in the preparation. They're putting in the merit.
Sure, hold on. I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't think a kid that naturally scores a 1200 on the SAT is test prepping his way to 1600.
Obviously, like why are you using extremes to a perfect score?
Or to a 1500. I don't think he's test prepping himself. I don't think a 50th percentile kid is test prepping himself to 5th percentile.
Let's look it up. Go and freaking.
Wait, I thought we were reading questions.
What's that site that like? what's it called? In college, like that forum everyone goes on to like talk about like how to get into certain colleges. What's it called? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Reddit?
No, it's
4chan?
no, it's
Kiwi
called
Farms?
College Confidential, yeah.
I don't know what that...
No, I'm saying if we see a link come up on there, click it, because those are all just like real students being crazy. No, I'm saying like search what we were gonna search, but hopefully like a link pops up from that site. What?
I thought that like I could be wrong, but somebody can tell me this I'm wrong. Didn't a bunch of schools eliminate standardized testing as part of their admissions for a while because they thought that it was like bullshit and they didn't want to discriminate against black people, I guess, again. But then eventually they brought it back because they were like, these are important. Am I making that up?
I haven't heard of schools actually eliminating them. There are some schools who don't view them as like a
I
main
thought some
factor.
schools a few years ago, I thought they dumped either the SATs or the ACTs or whatever. Oh, somebody said MIT did it and they brought it back. UCs all did that. Hold on. MIT, standardized testing, brought back.
If MIT did it, it's definitely not for race reasons, because MIT doesn't care about that. It's probably because they actually think it doesn't correlate to like the type of intelligence they're looking for, because that's like a very good school.
Wow, what do you mean by that? Can you break that down for us?
MIT, it's like a very top tier tech
So they
school.
wouldn't care about affirmative action? Good schools don't care about black people?
I'm saying you're making it sound like if they did this, it's for some like woke reason, and I'm saying it's probably because they're like saying it doesn't correlate.
So people only want black people for woke reasons, or?
I don't even know if the SAT discriminates against black people with preparation considerate.
That's the whole point why people wanted to get rid of those tests, is because they thought it was racially discriminatory.
Inherently, or because of preparation?
I don't know. People are crazy, but I think that was like a big reason for why people wanted to get rid of it. Like, I think we read that on the last article that we read, where they said that they got rid of it because it was like discriminatory versus minorities.
I get that. I'm asking, like, in what way? Like, are they saying, like, even with preparation, like, if you give both students
it's just
6
like
months of
literally
prep?
They're like racist tests. Yeah.
Is that what they were saying?
If it's school, if it's college faculty, or I'm sorry, if it's college administration, probably. Okay, sorry, let me check. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology announced this week that applicants once again must submit SAT or ACT scores, becoming the first prominent university to reverse a suspension of the requirement that was put in place because of the pandemic. The reversal could reignite the debate over the value of test scores in college admissions, which have been criticized for putting minority and lower income students at a disadvantage. But experts said it is not yet certain if other schools will follow. It's not surprising that MIT, which is perhaps best known for its engineering and science programs, would be more willing than other universities to return to a test-based admissions process, given the highly technical nature of their curriculum, said Zachary Bleemer. Oh, this guy again. This guy shows up everywhere, huh? A postdoctoral fellow and education researcher at Harvard University. You know what?
He's just on a media tour.
When we do these things, I'm big enough that we could probably get these people on stream. I bet if I tweeted at this guy, because especially like these guys, they love attention because nobody cares about them otherwise.
What do you mean?
Like if we tweeted him, he'd be like, I would love to talk about like this stuff. Yeah, but like researchers love to talk about their shit because usually people don't care. I bet if we tweeted this guy, we could get him on.
So this didn't say why MIT did it. It just said...
Wait, hold on. This guy says, Destiny, I took the ACT for the first time in 8th grade after taking geometry and got a 24. Throughout high school, I took 3 more ACTs and I got 35 on my final one. I bought the ACT test book and I credited it with my success in raising my score. I was also able to help others get a higher score simply by doing mock tests with them and using the same test book.
Yeah, you're crazy. Like, I
wait.
have no basis.
Do you read it? In 8th grade, I got a 24, and then finally, after high school, I got a 35. I wonder what else might have changed there.
No, but anyways, no, like actually though, it makes a huge difference.
Am I don't believe it, but I'm going personally, anecdotally, totally personally. Like,
I'm sick, okay?
Good. Okay. You might be totally right, by the way. I don't know what the research is on this. This is just my personal...
Randomly controlled trial shows SAT prep only increases SAT score, click it, by 30 points.
This is 2005, though, to be fair. That's a long time away. College Board-sponsored survey of a nationally representative sample of 1995 to 96 SAT takers yielded a database for more than 4,000 examinees, about 500 of whom had attended formal coaching programs outside their schools. Several alternative analytical methods were used to estimate the effects of coaching on SAT 1 reasoning test scores. The various analyses produced slightly different estimates. All of their estimates, however, suggested that the effects of coaching are far less than is claimed by major commercial test preparation companies. The revised SAT does not appear to be any more coachable than its predecessor.
I got a 1200 on my first SAT. Can I get a 1500? No, I'm gonna find some freaking college confidential kids going off about this. Wait. Because they're gonna hear stories, because they always talk about their success stories.
This guy, I'm just reading a quote. Research suggests the SAT widely used in college admissions is primarily a measure of G. Oh, okay. Oh, SAT scores have a very, very strong correlation with G scores, which means that test prep wouldn't help that much. I doubt that it's as highly correlated as like an IQ test would be, though. I'm sure that some test prep can help. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm sure you could boost your score. Like, Like, if I'm pulling out numbers out of my ass, like, depending on where you're at in the percentile, like 10 to 15%. Like, if you're like a 50th percentile student, I bet you could get up to like the 60s.
This is a huge difference.
Or 70s.
SAT score improved from 1290 to 1490. 1490 is really good for.
Well, if that guy improved it, then damn. Nice.
I'm just showing you a ton of links of people talking about prep.
That was a guy that improved his score from that to that.
What do you want from me?
Good for him. That's good. G is what IQ attempts to estimate. Yeah, good job, Sir Florg. That's why I brought up IQ tests as an example. Congratulations. What is G score? G score is a hypothetically, there exists some score to measure the like overall intelligence of a brain, basically. IQ is supposed to be a proxy for G. Whether or not G actually exists, there are going to be some researchers, depending on how woke or not woke they are going to contest whether or not that even exists. But like broadly speaking, G is just like intelligence.